Before we start, watch this. This is footage filmed by a hunter named Kevin Paul in April 2026, deep in the mountain forests of Canada's Northwest Territories. An enormous wild creature stands face to face with him. For a brief second, its massive head jerks, and in slow motion, you can actually see it blink. Researchers are calling it one of the most valuable Sasquatch sighting recordings of the year. There's a second clip too, same region, showing a towering humanoid figure sprinting through the trees at a speed no man could match. Keep both of these in mind, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why creatures like this might be connected to one of the darkest unsolved mysteries in North America. There's a national park in Canada's Northwest Territories called Nahanni, and for over a century, it has swallowed people whole. Gold seekers, hunters, ordinary travelers. So many of them have died or vanished here that since 1908, at least 44 people have died or disappeared in this valley. Locals gave it a name generations ago, and the name has never gone away, the Valley of the Headless Men. Stick with me on this one, because the case we're about to walk through happened in the 21st century, not the 1800s, not some grainy black and white era. 2005, satellite phones existed, GPS existed, and it still happened. On June 12, 2005, a man named David Horsey set out with his close friend Frederick Hardesty into the Nahanni Valley to hunt. Horsey was 60 years old, and Hardesty went with him to a friend's cabin 125 kilometers northwest of Fort Simpson. Horsey had spent decades in these mountains. Both men were described by everyone who knew them as inseparable, experienced bushmen. Not city tourists, not weekend campers. Men who had survived this wilderness before. The trip wasn't only about hunting. They were also going to help their friend Rod Gunderson repair his cabin. That cabin sat deep in the wilderness, overlooking the South Nahanni River, with towering rock cliffs rising behind it. It was completely isolated. The nearest help was over 100 kilometers away. But it was built to survive, stocked with a stove, beds, food, rifles, ammunition. Built solid enough that even a half-ton grizzly couldn't tear through the walls. Now picture this scene with me for a second. Two experienced woodsmen, a cabin stocked with everything a person could need to survive weeks out there, loaded rifles within arm's reach. This wasn't a group of people who were unprepared, and that's exactly what makes what happened next so hard to explain. On the 12th, Rod met the two men at the cabin, walked through the repair plan with them, and then left for town to pick up supplies, leaving Horsey and Hardesty behind to start the work. 4 days later, on the morning of June 16th, Rod came back, and the two men were gone. The repairs hadn't even been started. At first, he figured they'd wandered off to hunt. Then he looked down. A rifle was lying on the ground. Eggshells were scattered across the floor, and when he looked closer, he froze. The walls were riddled with bullet holes, large and small, wood splinters torn out and scattered across every corner of the room. Something had happened here, something violent. Rod called it in immediately. An officer named Parker was sent out to investigate. When he got there, the chimney was still smoking. The fire in the stove hadn't fully died. Food was still sitting inside. The rifles hadn't even been taken. Nothing was missing. Whatever forced these two men out that door, they left in a hurry, and not that long before Rod walked in. A trained officer, standing in that cabin, could not come up with a single reasonable explanation. There were no apparent signs of any problems he could see. There was plenty of food and shelter left behind, so nobody could speculate as to why they'd left, and neither could anyone else who knew these men. 2 days later, on June 18th, a full search operation launched. Residents from around Fort Simpson joined in too. Teams combed the surrounding wilderness by boat and by helicopter, covering ground that stretched for miles in every direction, searching a landscape so thick and so vast that a person could be lying 20 feet off a trail and never be seen. 11 days after the two men vanished, on June 27th, searchers finally found David Horsey's body, in a dense thicket about 3.7 kilometers from the cabin. 11 days after that, on July 8th, Frederick Hardesty's body was pulled from the North Nahanni River, roughly 20 kilometers downstream from where the cabin stood. Now here's where it gets stranger. The initial report said both bodies were largely intact, but Horsey had unexplained burn marks across his hands and arms. Nobody could say what had caused them. Officially, it was ruled that Horsey died of hypothermia, and Hardesty died by drowning. The case was closed, no murder, no criminal act, case closed. No further details were made public. But the families weren't finished. Horsey's stepbrother, Joseph, went to the cabin himself, months after the official investigation wrapped. He found the same scene the officers had described, eggshells still on the floor, Boards blasted through with bullet holes, every single round in the rifle fired. Not one bullet left. Hardesty's family, when they examined his body, found something else. A large tear ripped straight through his shirt. Beyond that, no further details about the condition of either body were ever released to the public. The case was filed away as a tragic accident. The families never accepted that answer. How could two men in one weekend both die? One in the river and one in the bush. It's very unsettling. There's no closure, Horace's sister said. Families asked, again and again, for the case to be reopened. Every single request was denied. Officials maintained that the investigation had been thorough and complete. Think about the math here for a second, because this is the part that keeps people up at night. Two experienced outdoorsmen, in a cabin stocked with food, weapons, and shelter, somehow end up dead in two completely different locations. One in dense bush nearly 4 kilometers away, one in a river 20 kilometers downstream, within the same short window of time. Whatever pushed them out that door, it had to be something they feared more than the wilderness itself, more than a bear, more than the cold, more than the isolation they'd both survived for years. Years after the case went cold, a comment surfaced online from someone claiming to have been part of the original search team. According to them, the true state of Horace's body was kept from the public. They claimed his head was missing entirely, that his body was covered in fractures, arms broken, legs broken, that nobody on the search team knew what had done it, and nobody wanted to talk about it afterward. Now, I want to be upfront with you here. This detail has never been officially confirmed anywhere. Take it for what it is, an unverified claim from an anonymous commenter. But it's a claim that's spread for a reason, because of what this valley is already known for. Other viewers pointed out something that connects all of this together. The stretch of land where these two men died has carried the name Headless Valley for well over 100 years. And that name isn't some internet nickname. It's tied to a documented pattern of unexplained disappearances and deaths going back generations, many of them linked to something people out there swear is enormous and is not human. One commenter shared a personal experience that a lot of people in the replies said gave them chills. Last summer, they went up the mountain alone to pick mushrooms. This is a massive stretch of wilderness with only one way in and one way out. No vehicles came up or down that road all day. Just before sunset, they heard a call coming from down in the valley. Deep, enormous, completely unlike any animal they'd ever heard. They said they'd lived in that area their entire life, hiked that mountain at least twice a week, year after year, and had never once heard anything like it. Not a bear, not a moose, something else. Let's talk about the land itself for a moment because I think this actually matters to the story. The Nahanni Valley covers over 30,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Belgium. More than 90% of it is untouched wilderness, dense forest, towering peaks, and a maze of rivers and lakes that almost nobody has ever laid eyes on. It became a national park reserve in 1976. There are no campgrounds here, no roads, no visitor facilities of any kind. The only way in is by chartered plane, or by boat, fighting the current upriver for hours before you even get close. Even pilots who've flown this park for over 40 years admit there are still places out there they've never seen. Now picture trying to search for two missing men in that. Not a park with trails and ranger stations. A place where even the people who know it best still don't know what's out there. The most dangerous stretch inside the park is a massive expanse of raw, untouched wilderness, Headless Valley itself, almost entirely unmarked by human presence. And for centuries, the handful of indigenous families who tried to settle in this region vanished without a trace. Local oral history speaks of towering beings living in these mountains, beings some elders called mountain demons. Today, a lot of researchers believe these old stories describe something much closer to a regional variant of Sasquatch, one that's bigger and far more aggressive than what gets reported almost anywhere else in North America. Witnesses in the Northwest Territories consistently describe a creature noticeably larger and more powerfully built than the Sasquatch reported in places like Washington or Oregon, exactly like the one hunter Kevin Paul filmed at the start of this video, estimated at over 9 feet tall. And here's the part that a lot of people don't realize. Horsey and Hardesty were not the first men to vanish this way in this exact stretch of forest. Not even close. Since the early 1900s, a string of eerily similar headless body cases have come out of this same valley. In 1906, two brothers named McLeod went into the valley, chasing rumors of a massive gold vein. They told friends before they left that they'd found gold so pure it could set them up for life. They were never heard from again. 2 years later, in 1908, an expedition found two bodies tied to a tree deep in the valley. Confirmed to be the McLeod brothers, both men had been decapitated. Their heads were never recovered. That single discovery is what gave this place its name. Word spread down the river to the trading posts, and from that point forward, this river basin stopped being just a frontier. It became the Headless Valley, a place where, as people said back then, the map ended and the monsters began. And the deaths didn't stop with the McLeods. In 1989, 6 miners formed a group and headed into the valley with gold-panning gear and weapons, hoping to strike it rich the same way the McLeods once claimed to have. All 6 vanished on the way in. Years later, a hunter passing through the area stumbled onto a small, abandoned campsite and found human bones scattered around it. The skeletons were still gripping their rifles, and every single one of them was missing its head. Officials ruled that the 6 men had frozen to death, and that animals had carried the skulls away afterward. The case barely made the news. Almost nobody outside that region ever heard about it. And this pattern wasn't isolated to just these cases. Similar deaths have surfaced across the decades. Explorers, hunters, trappers, all dying the exact same way. Remains are still turning up out in that forest to this day. So let's actually break down what might have happened to Horsey and Hardesty, using everything we've laid out. One theory says something attacked the cabin that night. Something large enough that both men grabbed their rifles and fired directly into the walls, trying to scare it off. When they ran out of ammunition, running was the only option left. Maybe they got separated in the dark, out in the open, with no visibility and no time to think. Hardesty ended up in the river, which, remember, ran right past the front of that cabin. Horsey made it further into the bush before he went down. It sounds extreme, I know, but there's a case in the United States that lines up with this almost perfectly, and it's one of the most famous encounters in Bigfoot history. At Ape Canyon, near Mount St. Helens, 5 miners were attacked overnight in their cabin by a group of massive, ape-like creatures. Just like Horsey and Hardesty, those miners grabbed their rifles and fired straight into the walls, trying to drive the creatures back. It didn't work. One of the creatures reportedly got its arm through a gap in the door, trying to force its way inside, before the miners managed to shove it back out. The siege lasted the entire night. Only at dawn, when the creatures finally retreated back into the trees, were the 5 men able to escape. One of them said afterward that if they'd had even 1 fewer man in that cabin, or 1 fewer rifle, none of them would have made it out alive. Those miners got down that mountain. Horsey and Hardesty never did. And that's really the question this entire case leaves us with. What do you do when the evidence on the ground, the bullet holes, the fired rounds, the men running from a fully stocked shelter into a deadly river valley at night, doesn't match any explanation that's ever been officially given? The file was closed. The families never got their answers. And the valley kept its name. What happened out there still stands as a warning to anyone who thinks they can walk into that land uninvited. The disappearances. The bodies found without their heads. The unexplained calls echoing through the trees after dark. Maybe it isn't folklore at all. Maybe it's the wilderness answering back to a world that keeps pushing further into places it was never meant to go. Somewhere out there, in the deepest, least touched corners of this earth, there may still be things that exist outside of everything we think we understand. So here's what I want to know from you. If you were standing in that cabin, seeing what Rod Gunderson saw that morning, the bullet holes, the untouched food, the rifles just sitting there, would you have run into that forest at night too? Or stayed and taken your chances inside? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one of them. If this story kept you hooked till the end, that's exactly the kind of case we dig into on this channel every single week. So hit subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. And if you're new here, welcome, you're going to fit right in. Smash that like button before you go. It genuinely helps this channel more than you'd think. See you in the next video.